We're here with Chris Bott, the Economic Development Director for Meridian Township. We're in downtown Okemos, and one of the reasons we are down here talking with Chris today is to talk about TIF, tax increment financing.
Correct.
Sounds exciting, right? Don't go away from this fan page because there's an important reason why we are talking about this with you today. Tell us what TIF is.
Sure. Tax increment financing is a vehicle for developers to be able to recoup some of the expenses that they need to redevelop properties that are fallen in disrepair, buildings past their useful life, or environmental contamination. There are two different types of TIFs. There may be more, but the two that apply in downtown Okemos in particular, you have brownfield TIFs. Brownfield basically is usually a contamination cleanup. That's whether you have asbestos and lead, or you have gas stations that have underground tanks that are contaminating the soil. So it's really about environmental cleanup.
And we have that in downtown Okemos. We have that in downtown Okemos, correct?
That's correct. Yep. The other TIF that we can use is the DDA's TIF. Our Downtown Development Authority does have an existing tax capture, and we can use the increment, which I'll explain in a second, to help developers redevelop properties to get the properties redeveloped, to get something in here that's different than what we have here now.
So both of those apply to this area.
Correct.
What other areas in the township would this apply?
My understanding is that the Brownfield TIF applies to anywhere where there's contamination. The DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, has high standards and wants contaminated sites cleaned up so they can be activated to help projects happen. Really, the goal behind Brownfield is we want to encourage developers to redevelop a defunct or unattractive parcel, as opposed to taking a big green space and building something there. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to take a green field and build a building, or if they could take an old property like this and build a building, the community would rather have them repurpose an existing pad of asphalt than take a wooded lot and turn that into the same project. But it's more expensive to repurpose an already existing parcel like this. And so to encourage them to do that, we allow them to get reimbursed for costs that basically level out the economies to scale on using this lot versus a green space lot.
Where does the money come from?
Sure. Every year, the assessor's department goes and puts a value on every parcel in the township. So every single piece of land has an assessed value. Now, as you can imagine, all the things that you see behind us here, the value is pretty low. Now, so there's a number on the cost of the value of this land, and the person who owns this land pays the township a tax bill 2 times a year. What can happen is, if a developer wanted to come in and redevelop this block, they can meet with the assessor and say, okay, imagine this parcel here with 20,000 square feet of commercial space and 100 apartments or condos or whatever, and they can explain what they want to build, and the assessor can give them a pretty good number as to what the new assessed value would be. So I'm going to use very, very broad numbers. It has nothing to do with this space. But if the assessed value of this property is $200,000, and then after the development it's expected that this property is going to be $1 million, then that $800,000 increment, the tax money that the developer would have to pay on the $800,000 property that they develop, that $600,000 gap is the increment. And so that money can go back to the developer for costs that they had to incur to make this space ready for construction. Mm-hmm. So the things to keep in mind are taxpayers will not pay more money.
Okay. And
the people that receive the tax money aren't going to receive less tax money. So the township collects taxes, and then some of that obviously stays with the township, but it's divvied up. Some goes to cattle, the library system, some goes to CATA, the transportation authority, some goes to the county, some goes to police, some goes to parks. All of those people, when the taxes come in, get their chunk of the millages that are collected in those taxes. So what we're telling them is, if no project happens here, the township's going to get the taxes on this $200,000 valued property, and that's all we're going to get. But if a developer is going to come in and spend, say, $5 million to clean up the contaminated site, or build some infrastructure, bury some of these power lines, or upgrade the sewer and plumbing, sewer and water system, or sidewalks and streets, and if they had to put that money in there to make this inner block developable, and that costs them $10 million to do that, they will pay all that money up front, the developer will, to do all of that infrastructure, but they'll do it under the understanding that when their bill goes from a $200,000 property to an $800,000 property, and that tax bill rises, they will be able to keep that increment. So the community, the people that receive that tax money, on the $200,000 will receive that $200,000 worth of tax money for a period of time until the developer gets reimbursed themselves for all that infrastructure and contamination cleanup. But then once that's done, well, first of all, immediately the community gets a better looking facility and a place to gather and to live and to shop and to dine. But then once that payback is finished, the tax value of $800,000 stays and probably continues to grow. So what we ask is for the community to understand that we may enter into an agreement with the developer to allow them to keep that or to get themselves to be reimbursed for that infrastructure in order for the development to happen.
How does the process take place? How does the developer find out about a brownfield area, tax increment financing? How do they find that out?
Sure. Well, the brownfield process has been around for about 20 years, and so that's become kind of a standard. If you're in the development world and you're looking at parcels to develop something, you know that exists and you understand the process. Meridian Township has a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, so we have our own version of policies and procedures, application processes, fees that get collected, and then eligible activities. We define our own what is reimbursable. You can't get reimbursed for this, but you can get reimbursed for that. And it all pretty much stems around infrastructure upgrades and environmental cleanup that you can do for brownfield, more of the environmental side. The DDA, our Downtown Development Authority, which downtown Okemos is included in, has a similar type of a process where they can apply, and there's different eligible activities. So brownfield is more cleanup and maybe demo of a building that has lead and asbestos, whereas the DDA TIF can be used for more of the infrastructure improvements, sidewalks, roads, power lines, sewer, water, upgrades, all to try to get the developer to a pad-ready construction site that they would have in a greenfield.
Okay, so in a nutshell, TIF, tax increment financing, why do we care? Why do residents care in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, you need to care because you need to understand that your taxes are not going to go up if you're a taxpayer. If you're an entity that receives taxes like LCC or CATA or CADOL, your taxes, the money you receive from taxes collected is not going to go down. So we want everyone to take a deep sigh of relief that their taxes aren't going up and the received taxes are not going down. So that is the big part of it. And then if you're just a resident and you want this to look wildly different, know that is absolutely the vehicle that needs to be optimized in order for any development to happen. If we don't leverage these opportunities to help a developer come in, downtown Okemos is going to look like this for the next 50 years.
Okay. How can someone get a hold of you if they have any questions?
Yeah, buck@meridian.mi.us is my email address, or you can go to the Meridian Township website and click on the economic development page. My contact information is there, and a lot of information and supporting documents to this conversation are there as well.
Okay, thank you so much. I also want to let you know that the Okemos DDA, the Downtown Okemos fan page, is being changed to the Meridian Economic Development page. So you will be seeing those changes on Facebook.